This is part 2 of my ornamental turning lathe project, in which I created a small end grain conical box, digitized it in Gerbil Glue, imported that into corn lathe, made a design, and created appropriate G-code. This is where the box started, and I wanted the pattern to start on the very right hand edge of this. I imported the G-code into Mach 3 and arranged the cutting tip right at the very edge of that box and entered those coordinates as the starting position. So all I had to do was start my spindle and press cycle start. And away it went. Now interestingly, this is turning in a positive direction on my lathe. Normally I turn in a always negative direction. I hadn't selected the always negative choice when generating the G-code, and this had an interesting effect. This will do 2 passes in a positive direction and then switch to the negative direction for the finishing pass. And that left a very tiny ridge at the bottom of each of those valleys. And that's not the fault of Gerbil Glue or of corn lathe. That's the fault of me having a loose pulley on my C-axis. So you can just see those little tiny ridges. So I decided to stop everything and regenerate the G-code so that it always turned in a negative direction. This has the effect of keeping my chuck tight in the screw. I sped up the cutting action 20 times since it's a little monotonous watching this thing cut. The entire project took about an hour to cut. This little cutter is a 1/8 inch solid carbide 60-degree D-bit mounted in that little fly cutter body that I turned on this metal lathe. It's quite a simple device, but it produces beautiful patterns. I have a vacuum going that collects most of the sawdust, but at this time of year it's very dry here in the winter, so the air is quite staticky. From time to time I brush it off with a stiff plastic brush just to get some of the sawdust off and have an idea what the pattern is doing. Here's a view from the top, and you can see that the individual elements of the pattern are quite sharp. And that's the speed that it's normally turning. Here's a view from the front to show you what the machine is doing to produce all of this. The cross slide goes in and out to create the depth of cut. The C-axis is rotating, and when it has to reposition, then the Z-axis gives a turn. So we'll speed it up and go to the bottom of this little box. The roughing passes are obviously a lot faster than the finishing pass, and I let corn lathe determine how fast these cuts are being made. So that's the end of the last bit of cutting. I had the machine back away so that you can see the final result. There's a certain amount of sawdust left on the surface of this, and some fuzzies of course, but these scrubbed off quite easily with a stiff plastic brush. There's a view of the little carbide cutter. Really quite a simple tool. This was turning at 4,000 RPM. There's a view from the top showing how crisp the lines are between the design elements. So I took this to the lathe, trimmed it off a little bit, made a walnut lid for it and a walnut base, put on some wipe-on poly finish, and that's what I got. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it.